So Councillor Richard Cornelius, you have up to 15 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I heard the size, and I promise I won't read 15 minutes. There are many, many pages of budget here, and I am always impressed with officers' diligence in producing these. Thank you, Mr. Hooton and your team. I have gone through it very carefully, and I think that, I mean, I don't want to set myself up for a challenge, but I didn't even see a typo in it, so thank you very much for that. I'm very pleased that we have this budget to move tonight. Across the chamber, you know, this time we've got a general election coming, and we can reflect on what we faced 5 years ago with a government that had spent its way to disaster, where there was friction and difficulty. There was, I think, across the chamber we would agree, there was an unsatisfactory election result in the we wanted a very conservative majority and didn't get it. However, I have to say that coalition government has been amazingly successful. Liberal Democrats, I've always regarded as sort of fluffy bunnies, sorry, but they have shown themselves to be able to take serious decisions and have risen to this challenge, and I don't suppose that they expected to face it, and they've done well. This council has also done its part. We've reduced spending, we've managed to reduce the burden of taxation over just a little bit, but I'm pleased that we've done that, and I'm pleased that all across the chamber supported that. Colleagues will amplify the situation which we face across individual portfolios and committees, the development that we are running through, which is immensely successful, producing the housing across all tenures that we need. There have never been so many homes built in Barnet, and we can be proud of that. It's a difficult process, but we've worked hard and we've got there. Now, after the 2015 municipal election, when we changed the committee system, the first thing we did was to face up to the challenge, and I am very pleased that the P&R committee accepted the savings we're likely to make over the next 4 years. Thank you to Labour members for recognising the reality, and thanks to those committees for all their work. The truth is, no political party going into an election will say that they're going to slash budgets. However, you don't need to be brain of Britain to see what's going to happen. The comprehensive spending review in 2016 will cut spending. Many areas of public spending are protected, so our own budget will be even more adversely affected. Hilary Benn, who is the more two-dimensional version of Eric Pickles, has written to me saying that a future Labour government will match Conservative spending plans, and further, there will be a significant transfer of funds to other areas of the country away from the southeast. This means we would be far worse off. We can huff and puff, but the cuts seem inevitable. Officers' best advice is that we need to find approximate savings of £73 million. And so far, with cuts that not all of us like, we've only come up with 51 million. And we have to find this further £52 million somewhere. It may come from development or being more commercial. I hope it does. But there is a £20 million gap. However, we also have to be aware that each reversal of a spending cut caused greater savings being required elsewhere. This makes it even more difficult. And we don't want to go down the route that so many Labour councils have had to do of slash and burn cuts when their plans fell into disarray. We can think of Brent closing so many libraries, Birmingham, Newcastle and Edinburgh with mass redundancies. Compare this with what we've managed to achieve in Barnet. Remember, we were advised to emulate Edinburgh and Newcastle. Actually, it was the trade unions who sent me the proposals for Edinburgh, which convinced me that they were absolute crackers, so I'm grateful for them for sending it to me. Turning to the detail of this year's budget, I'm pleased that we've been able to continue with the 1% cut. We haven't had to restore that in council tax for another year. This is a big achievement. I know officers in their bean counting role are upset at this, but it is an important help to members of the community. I'm pleased that we can allocate some cash to rebuild the pools and get people fitter by swimming more and being more energetic in the fitness centres. Well done, Councillor Hart. I'm delighted there's some more capital for roads. This is important. The roads, we were told some time ago, need an additional £350 million invested in them. The government was only able to give us £350,000. This is not enough, so the council's resources will be stretched and Councillor Cohen will announce more money to be spent. This report has an immense section on inequalities. A lot of work has been done, and I've come to regard these issues as very important. In such a diverse borough as Barnet, it would be very easy for some to fall through the net, and it's important that we do look after the people who live here. There's been a lot of consultation, albeit with a relatively small sample, but I suppose that means that people are happy. But anyway, I'm sure members from the other side will give us their opinions shortly. I thank all members for their work on this council. Things have gone relatively well, and we have managed to survive successfully for another year, so congratulations. The matters in this report have been set out in immense detail and have been widely discussed at committees. No one is arguing about the difficulties that lie ahead for the next government and for this council. International creditors won't give us the latitude that Greece has had, so whatever government we get will say hard cheese to the outer London boroughs. I'm afraid spending cuts in the future are inevitable, and we have to face up to it, and we have to plan for it rather than react. And this is what we have done in this budget. Mr. Mayor, I move the budget.
Councillor Alison Moore, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I rise as the first speaker for the Labour Group this evening. A group of 30 councillors elected last May by the people of Barnet. In that election, Labour all but won the popular vote, and the Barnet Tories clung on to power by a whisker. They have spent the past year relying repeatedly on the casting vote of the Mayor in his chamber to greater or lesser effect. Rather than being humbled by their near demise, rather than recognising that the people of Barnet sent them a very clear message on parking, on mass privatisation of council services, on their record on waste and mismanagement, on the costly judicial reviews, the failure to listen and respond to local residents' concerns, and their disregard for proper democratic process and fairness. Rather than that, it has been business as usual, the same dismissive arrogance. And we just got another dose of that in the extraordinary meeting debate on libraries, with that absurdly pusillanimous amendment from Councillor Tomstone and the unforgivable vote that followed. Mr. Mayor, I make absolutely no apologies about the fact that the Labour Group cannot and will not support the administration's budget proposals. It is built on a decade of the Barnet Tories' ideological commitment to privatisation, slashing public sector jobs and to letting market forces rule. It is built on the fallacy that outsourced services will be cheaper, deliver better, and that public services do not matter. Built on flawed options appraisals rather than proper analysis. And Mr. Mayor, since 2010, under an appalling right-wing Tory government, it has been about an ideological commitment to small government, to completely gutting the funding for local councils, and it all spells the end of local democracy. This is something we cannot and will not support. This Tory government, with the enthusiastic support of all three local Tory MPs, has imposed unprecedented and unsustainable levels of cuts to local government, effectively halving the council's budget through recent settlements. And it's done all this without a whimper of opposition from the Barnet Tories, who certainly haven't been putting the community first, but have relished, or appear to have relished, the task of taking it apart piece by piece. And nationally and locally, it is the poorest and most vulnerable in our community who are picking up the tab. The Tories boast about freezing or cutting council tax for residents in Barnet, some of whom are among the wealthiest in the country, but think it is absolutely okay to more than double the council tax paid by those on council tax support, some 20,000 people of the poorest residents in Barnet. And in the budget before us this evening, the Tories have done little to ensure the cuts they have made are fair. Mr Mayor, much of the budget before us makes little long-term sense, because in the end, cutting crucial frontline services results in greater demand for local services as more people fall below the safety net, and the council ends up footing the bill. Take housing. The year-on-year failure to build sufficient affordable housing under this administration means that the temporary accommodation bill is going through the roof. It's not good for those families to be pushed from pillar to post, not be able to put down roots, their children unable to have a stable education, their older family members without continuing health care. And Mr Mayor, 27% of children in Barnet live in poverty, and yet the Tories want to put up council rents to 80% of market rents, when rising housing costs are the reason for more and more being forced into poverty. Just what sense does that make, unless you are bent on forcing them out of the borough or social cleansing? The Tories say that they want to help people into work, but Barnet's childcare costs are amongst the most expensive in London, make it impossible for many to go back to or stay in work. And what did the Tories do? They cut affordable childcare funding, closed children's centres, and have struggled to meet their 2-year-old place obligation. And so many jobs in Barnet are now part-time, low-paid or on exploitative zero-hours contracts. Many on low incomes have been forced to rely on housing benefit, income support, council tax support to make ends meet. These people are not scroungers, they are the working poor who have been forced into claiming benefits because of low pay. As your answer, proposals to put up the rents, crippling those who are not on benefits, and fleecing the public purse for those who are. While the Tories say there's no housing crisis, the housing developments they have so proudly showed Mayor Boris last week, the one intended for those trying to get onto the property ladder, a one-bedroom property which costs £210,000. Unless mortgage rules have changed, you'd need to be earning an MP's salary to afford that. And the so-called recovery has been painfully slow, especially for ordinary people. Poor pay, ballooning house prices, lack of genuinely affordable housing, real wages down by as much as £3,000 a year since 2010. Let's face it, the Tories are bad for Barnet and they are bad for Britain, and we've seen no better example this evening. Mr Mayor, when you look at Barnet Tories' budget, it slashes council services across the board, hitting residents time and again. And we've seen this evening the budget will be set to decimate libraries. As ever, despite people's massive cuts to the local budget, their budget settlement, you could have made different choices, saved money in different ways to allow a rethink on the libraries, for example. I won't be moving a budget amendment this evening, not in the face of such appalling intransigence on libraries and everything else. But we do have a set of validated savings that would have allowed our library proposal to go ahead, setting aside money from those savings in reserve against the medium-term financial strategy and allowing £200,000 to fund the process of developing and consulting on a new set of library options. So just for the record, you could save £500,000 on consultants and agency staff, £75,000 scrapping Barnet First, £122,000 by reducing the commissioning committees from 8 to 4, making general functions a subcommittee of P&R, combining area forum and area committee chairs, reducing the special responsibility allowance for the chairs of licensing, audit and their vice chairs. £783,000 on communications posts, policy advisors and other posts, £81,000 on mayoral functions, flummery, refreshments, and of course, that perennial, the Tory councillors' free parking permits. £344,000 by deleting the commissioning directors in adults and children. We already have 2 directors in place for adults and children. £25,000 by deleting the members' training budget, because I think you are beyond salvation. £110,000 for reducing the publications budget across directorates. You could increase income from advertising by at least 30,000, and if you really put your minds to it, you could probably increase income in lots of other areas, and I don't mean charging local residents more. You could bring forward £104,000 of shared services savings that kick in later in the medium-term financial strategy. And all of this would give you enough to reverse the proposed £2.85 million cuts on our library budget. But even if we move these savings, we know you wouldn't vote for them because, as we saw earlier this evening, you have absolutely no commitment to the library service. And let's be clear, the Barnet Tories have form on this. It is the Barnet Tories who closed libraries, Totteridge, Brian Barnet, Hampstead Garden Suburb, and though it was finally rebuilt after a successful campaign by Labour Ward Councillor Barry Rawlings fighting alongside NTennant's South Brian Library. And you had secret plans to shut all but 7 libraries back in 2005-06. They were leaked and they were hushed up. To what? To build a modern library and replace it? Replace a modern library. Local residents wanted to keep their iconic library and we listened to that. End of story. And you have a proven lack of commitment to local libraries. You have no commitment to local government and local democracy. You have no commitment to doing the right thing for the people in Barnet when they come and ask you in this chamber. And for that reason, we cannot and will not support your budget.
You know you may not. Jack Cohen, and I believe you're moving an amendment.
I am for the help they're giving me in shaping my alternative budget. This time last year, Councillor Cornelius described my alternative budget as a sensible one you can understand. He then promptly voted it down. Last year, I proposed a freezing council tax. The Tories, backed by Labour, went for a 1% reduction. Councillor Cornelius described it back then as a gesture. I remember calling it a gimmick. Well, Mr. Mayor, it turned out an expensive gimmick, a futile gesture and a grave error of judgment. The result, a loss of income amounting to over £5 million over 4 years. More than enough to keep all our libraries open, more than enough to protect frontline services, and more than enough to look after the most vulnerable. This year, there has been pressure to increase council tax, and I agree that council tax rises are inevitable in the future. Even the Conservatives agree on this. However, government rules complicate the calculations. Council tax increases of 2% or more trigger a referendum. The cost of organising a referendum and the place the size of Barnet, in my view, outweighs any gains from the increase in income. So Barnet could raise the tax up to 1.99%, which would raise something like 2.5 million. But here's the sting in the tail. The council then loses the government freeze grant. So the net result is that almost 1.5 million goes back to the government. In other words, for every £1 increase in council tax, our residents would pay nearly half, going straight back to the government, not to local services. You know, Mr. Mayor, despite all the triumphant talk by Councillor Cornelius and his supine followers about the success of outsourcing Barnet lurches from one crisis to another. You know, Mr. Mayor, Winston Churchill has been describing Councillor Cornelius when he said this: success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Take the contract with Capita. Spend on this now amounts to over £100 million. And this does not include the £16 million upfront for capital IT payments. Are we getting value for money? No. Mr. Mayor, you don't know. Is anyone in the administration monitoring it? Again, you don't know. This is public money. There is no transparency, no checks and no balances. Although I must pay credit to Councillor Deborah, Councillor Snowden and went to Coventry to confront Capita. Well done to those two. The leader of this council and those crowding round him often talk about taking tough and difficult decisions. Well, up to now, they make plenty sure that the impact of their slash and burn policies stay well away from them. So tonight, in my alternative budget, Mr. Mayor, I'm setting them a test. How tough are they? how difficult their choice is when the cuts come nearer to home. So number one, I propose to cut every single responsibility allowance. Number two, cut all basic allowances for councils by £1,000 for councillors and charge councils £100 for members' parking permits. All of this saving an eye-watering amount of almost £450,000. Adding a whopping saving on the morality of £100,000, and we are well on our way to saving our libraries. So, to those of you over there, what's it to be? Your allowances, the flummery of office, free travel perks, or our libraries? And difficult choices indeed. And that's not all. My budget proposes further savings. The Tories have got rid of most of this authority's functions to private or joint venture companies. So it must follow there is now a strong argument to trim the top tier of management. This is exactly what I propose. And taken together with other head office savings, the removal of political assistance, cut back in consultancy and agency staff, I find another £1.5 million. So I am able to provide £1.6 million to fund our libraries, over £500,000 to boost the discretionary counter-tax support, and bring back the ever-popular neighbourhood skips. All of this, Mr Mayor, and you know what? I wasn't even trying. Finally, a vote for a Conservative budget is a vote for despair, failure and denial. Vote for my amendment for common sense, hope and sound economics. I move my amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cornelius, you have the right to sum up.
I promise I'll be very brief, Mr Mayor, after that Ramon's agreement. I just wonder, listening to some of the things that have been said, if members have very short and selective memories. Remember, the wasteful judicial review was not started by the council, but was started by someone else, not by us, and the legal advice they had was clearly well because it was out of time. I'd remind you that the capital contracts only count for 8% of council work. I'd remind you that Mr Micawber didn't do very well. If your income is exceeded by your expenses, you'll be in trouble, and that's where Labour went wrong. I'm impressed that Labour haven't produced a budget tonight, other than the statistics that Councillor Moore didn't choose to put to our scrutiny. They really are preparing for long-term opposition, and I'm deeply grateful for that. I promised Labour, the Labour members and had full support of the committee that we will help people if the council tax benefit system is not sufficient. Councillor Houston, I think we could probably agree that housing is too expensive in Barnet. I don't think it will be a wildly popular move to propose cuts in house prices. It is something that we are going to have to sort out, and the way to sort that out is by building more housing across all tenures, and shared equity is clearly an answer for this and gets people onto the escalator of home ownership. Now, I listened to Councillor Houston, and I'm glad this meeting's been recorded. I think Councillor Nicholas Boxall, the former leader of Hammersmith and Fulham, will be interested in the comments that you chose to repeat tonight. I think that's very worrying and certainly worthy of a national investigation were it true. This government has an excellent record on collecting taxes from the rich. It has done better than any other government. I remind you, you can't disown the Blair years. You can't do it. You didn't put income tax up during that time. You can't rewrite history, I'm afraid. I am disappointed that there is no budget to tear apart, because that's the customary way of handling these, and I hope that there will, perhaps Councillor Moore could be persuaded to produce one for us to tear apart next year. I'm grateful that I can be confident Labour members have had all the information they needed to produce a budget. It is extraordinary. I wonder whether there's some kind of disagreement amongst them. Anyway, at least they show themselves ready to take over this council, just as a Labour government would be a disaster should one be elected at the general election. I beg to move the budget.